In the hours immediately following Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor on the morning of December 7, 1941, agents of the United States government immediately began rounding up and eventually detained over 3,800 aliens, 55% of them Japanese, suspected of being loyal to the Empire of Japan.
Well, after an investigation and a series of hearings, many of these initial detainees were declared to be of no threat to national security and released to join their families in war relocation authority camps like Manzanar. Others whose intentions were more suspect were shipped off to Department of Justice internment camps for the duration of the war.
On February 19, 1942, at the urging of the Army and with the support of citizens groups, industry alliances, politicians, and many in the national and West Coast media, President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, granting the Secretary of War the authority to declare, at his discretion, areas of the country as military zones. Executive Order 9066 also gave the military broad powers to deny access to and to remove from these areas any and all persons deemed to be a threat to the United States of America.
Now, because of the military's lingering fear of a second Japanese attack, this time on the U.S. West Coast, and a concern that the Emperor's forces would be aided by the Japanese and Japanese Americans living in the area, the western United States was designated a military zone, and plans were made to move the region's Japanese residents away from places significant to the U.S. war effort.
Less than 1 month later, the U.S. government began incarcerating all Japanese aliens and their U.S.-born American citizen children residing along the United States Pacific coast, in remote inland locations, far from their homes and businesses.
Over the course of just a few months, over 100,000 men, women, and children, including orphans and successfully placed foster children, were imprisoned behind barbed wire, solely because of their ancestry. Those rounded up in the hours immediately following the attack on Pearl Harbor were given hearings. In this instance, there were few investigations conducted, rarely were charges levied, and next to no trials were held. Unless, of course, one counts those held in the court of public opinion and played out on the front pages and over the airwaves of an alarming number of the nation's newspapers and radio stations.
43 years after World War II ended, on August 10, 1988, the United States government finally acknowledged its error and admitted publicly that Japanese Americans were denied their fundamental civil rights as guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States.
So what is most important in this bill has less to do with property than with honor. For here we admit a wrong.
In a report prepared for Congress, it was determined that the decision to incarcerate was based not on justified military necessity, but on race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership.
Now, could this type of massive denial of due process happen again? It could, and it almost did in the aftermath of the attacks of September 11th, 2001. At Manzanar National Historic Site, the first established of the so-called war relocation centers, where over 11,000 people were confined, the National Park Service seeks to stimulate and provoke a greater understanding of and dialogue on civil rights, democracy, and freedom. Friends of Manzanar, a nonprofit California corporation, proudly assists the National Park Service in this all-important task. Together, they strive to assure that the bitter lessons of exclusion and detention without due process will never be forgotten.
But this important and necessary work takes contributions, your tax-deductible contributions. With the money raised, Friends of Manzanar will support the reconstruction of elements of Block 14, including latrine buildings, the laundry room, and ironing room. These structures will join barracks, buildings, and a mess hall, which tell the stories of life at Manzanar. When the reconstruction is completed, visitors to Manzanar will be able to step back in time and experience what it was like for an earlier generation of Americans, a generation forced to give up their homes, careers, and livelihoods, and have their civil rights violated merely because they shared a common ancestry with the enemy. Your tax-deductible contributions can help all Americans learn from this lesson in history.
Would you please be a friend of Manzanar? Because our future depends on it. To make a contribution or for more information on the Block 14 reconstruction project, please contact us at friendsofmanzanar.org. Thank you.